Hi, welcome to week 3 of our True Colors MiniCon series. It's the first week that we are launching during Pride, because we actually started on May 22nd, which was the day that the True Colors conference was scheduled for, and then obviously couldn't happen live. So this is the third session. It's the first one during Pride. And I think that it's kind of important that as we begin to think about Pride and the work that we're going to be doing today and talking about the spectrum of sexuality and last week's around gender, is to recognize the intersectionality of all of our identities. And right now in particular, we're in a really critical part of our lives and the world. And so I want to start with the recognition that Black Lives Matter and that trans Black Lives Matter. And I spoke to Drew John, who is an author, a poet, a blogger, and an activist. And he did a poem that he's allowing me to share with you. So we're going to start there, and then we're going to say their names, and then we'll move on to talking about the spectrum of sexuality. So I'm going to share my screen. And that PowerPoint disappeared. Here it is. And this is Drew John Ladd's commentary on race.
I'm salty because it's 2018 Black people on the scene. I'm salty because it's never been safe ever. Never been the same time after time after time. Black people have never been safe or respected. I'm salty because killing Black people are respected. Instead of going out and changing the world and using our people using their privilege to change them because Black people get killed. So instead of oh no, I'm salty because I have to watch my nephews go to school when I'm salty because I see the house and I feel for my life. I'm salty because this is the world I'm hurt to. There's no other way I can feel. I'm salty because the money I love I have a choice not to be. I don't get to not be this. I don't get to not be this body. They also get to be this body. I get to be proud of this body, but I'm sorry. Now we decide because with consequences, there will be consequences. These are the design because with consequences. This body is criminal. This body is dead. This body is made number of other things. This body is dead. This is the choice that we make. Choose to live in this country. That's what I'm saying.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble getting to the right screen share. So I'm sorry, I'm having trouble getting to the right screen share. I hope that you were able to see Drew's performance. And what's really interesting about that is that not interesting, that's the wrong word. What's really powerful about that is that he wrote that in 2018, and now it's 2020, and it's nothing is different. And so his point about people never being safe is true, as true now as it was 2 years ago, as it was 400 years ago. I also wanted to share another slide with you, that there's so many calls for action and calls for people to participate in what's going on. And I think that's really important. And there's some things to think about as we're doing this. So this slide came out today from Moral Monday, Connecticut. They are folks that have been leading the fight for Black Lives Matter. They're activists, they're Black leaders in Connecticut, and have been making a difference for years and years. And so they put out this information. It says my screen sharing is paused. Resume share. They put out, I'm not sure what's happening. New share. I apologize for this not showing up. There was a couple of different things that sadly were open on my screen. So anyway, this is from Moral Monday, Connecticut. And these are things that I think are really important to consider as you think about what you're going to do and what you're going to participate in. And so they asked us to ask ourselves these questions before we decide whether or not we're going to participate in an action for Black Lives Matter. You know, who is the source? Who's planning it? Are they a Black organizer? Have you heard of their work before? What is the intent? Is their intent performative, or is their intent to make systemic change? And what's the impact? Will what's happening damage current Black organization work? Will it silence Black voices, or will it amplify Black organizing goals? And I think those are three really important questions to ask ourselves as we move into this fight for dismantling the system of racism that keeps this country in 1619. So I'm going to leave that piece there, but I think that that's really important. I also think it's really important that we say their names. That if you, these are just some of the people who've been murdered recently, and as you look at this, you know, and we say their names, read what it says. These are what people were doing their lives and they died. Eric Gardner had just broken up a fight. Ezell Ford was walking in his neighborhood. Michelle Crusex was changing the lock on her home's front door. Tanisha Anderson was having a bad mental health episode and her brother called 911. Tamir Rice was a 12-year-old playing in the park. Natasha McKenna was having a schizophrenic episode when she was tased by police officers and died in Virginia. Walter Scott was going to an auto parts store. Tony McDade, a Black transmasculine person, was shot and killed by police last Wednesday after defending himself from an attack. Betty Jones answered the door to let Chicago police officers in to help her upstairs neighbor. Philando Castile was driving home from dinner with his girlfriend. Botham Jean was eating ice cream in his living room in Dallas. Atiana Jefferson was babysitting her nephew at home in Fort Worth, Texas. Eric Reason was pulling into a parking spot at a local chicken and fish stop. Dominique Clayton was sleeping in her bed. Breonna Taylor was also sleeping in her bed. 20 Black transgender women were murdered in the United States in 2019. And George Floyd was at the grocery store. Say their names. I'm going to start talking now about LGBTQ plus stuff, which is obviously not just white, it's LGBTQ plus, which means that all of the parts of our identity are represented. And there are people, LGBTQ people in every race, every ethnicity, every culture, every language, every time period. So, but one of the things I often start doing the work that I do when I do trainings, I often start with, true colors, does education and advocacy for gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, two-spirit, same gender, loving, pansexual, flexual, not straight, not labeling, straight so far, straight with options, straight but stuff happens, gender bending, bi, gender, pangender, agender, asexual, non-binary, and other sexual and gender minority youth. But I rarely take the time to actually define any of those. So we're going to start this session on sexuality with some of the definitions. And I want to say first off that LGBTQ youth and young adults are at the forefront of these definitions and the expanding definitions and the nuances of the definitions. That these are just some pictures I pulled off the internet. That's the GSA network in the upper left. That's Fierce, which is queer youth of color in New York, organizers. There's a group that's working, young LGBTQ plus organizers that are working against Native genocide. There's a Jewish group. That all of these groups are young people that are working to make a difference, number one. And also with the access to the internet, they now have an opportunity to really sort of nuance the levels of identity. I remember when I was first coming out, a really long time ago, there was really only two words that I knew. There was gay, which I actually felt comfortable with, and then there was lesbian, which I didn't feel comfortable with at all at the time. And then over time, that's changed. So there's all these different words. So let's take a quick look at some of them. But let me start by saying there's two things you need to remember as we go through this presentation, right? One, you don't have to keep up. You just have to keep open. Because the reality is that just because we might know like what definition I give you for polysexual today or pansexual or gray sexual or any of the words I'm going to talk through today, that doesn't mean that the young person that you're talking to or the individual that you're talking to shares the same definition. So we can't keep up, but we can keep open and we can just hear how people identify themselves. I would also want to say, especially to providers and educators and adults working with LGBTQ plus youth, you don't have to understand. Chances are we can't understand. If you're not walking in somebody's shoes, you can't really tell. You can't really know what it's like to walk in the world in their skin and their identity. So we don't have to understand. We don't even necessarily have to agree or approve. We just have to accept and respect. Tell me who you are, and I will accept and respect that. So I just, I thought I would start with the rainbow flag, because the rainbow flag was popularized. It's one of the oldest symbols of the most recent century. It was popularized in 1978, and originally, it's really kind of funny. Originally, it had 8 colors, but at the time, printing was really hard, and the more colors you had, the more expensive it was. So they very quickly got rid of the hot pink. I'm not sure why, but it went down to red, orange, yellow, green. They got rid of turquoise, and then it was just indigo. So it kind of came up with 6 colors, and purple is the bottom color. In 2017, the city of Philadelphia adopted a revised version of the flag. So the flag stayed the same pretty much from 1978 until 2017. And that they added black and brown stripes to recognize and draw attention to LGBTQ folks of color. And then in 2018, a graphic designer, Daniel Quasar, added the 5-color chevron to the rainbow flag. So it put greater emphasis on inclusion and progress. And it's actually called the progress flag. So it added trans flag to that. So let's start, before I do further work on the definitions and sort of teasing out some of the differences, let's just do a really quick definition of sexual orientation. And I do want to say that I'm going to give you one set of definitions. And again, this may not be how other people identify, so you need to check with the individual that you're talking to. But sexual orientation, as it's currently defined, is about the genders to which one is attracted. and that it breaks down into really 3 different levels of attraction. So there's an emotional attraction, which is basically one way of thinking about that is that's who you love, right? There's a romantic attraction, which is sort of who you might fall in love with. And then there's an erotic attraction, which is who you want to be sexual with or rub body parts with, right? And that those 3 things can be connected, they can all be the same, or they can all be different. So knowing who someone is emotionally attracted to doesn't necessarily tell you who they're romantically attracted to. Knowing who they're romantically attracted to doesn't necessarily tell you who they're erotically attracted to. So, but people in general, and this is just sort of a generalization, people can be attracted to, and remember, it can be flexible, changes over time. They can be attracted to one gender. So we would think of that as gay, lesbian, or straight, right? They can be attracted to 2 or more genders, bisexual, polysexual, polyromantic, etc. And we're going to go over those in a little minute. They can be attracted to all genders or attracted to people regardless of gender, which is pansexual, panromantic. That prefix pan means all, and that's why that's where that definition comes from. Or they may be attracted to no genders. They may not have romantic or erotic attractions. And that there's a lot of diversity within the asexual community around the levels of which people have attractions to different people romantically or erotically. So that's sort of the overview of the definitions. And let's just go and sort of take a walk using the flags. So there's the bisexual flag, which generally means, it used to mean just 2, male and female. Lots of times now the bisexual flag really means 2 or more, that there's a recognition that there are more than 2 genders and that people can be attracted regardless. Pansexual is people who can be attracted to all genders, or people who are attracted to others on some element of their identity other than gender. That's another way that people will do it. Sometimes there's a little, that people may have different ways that they differentiate between what bisexual means and what pansexual means. And so again, it's best, if you're not sure, to ask the person tell me what that means for you. Polysexual, as opposed to pansexual. So pan means all, poly means many. So a person who's polysexual might be attracted to people who are demisexual, people who are non-binary, but not people who are cisgender, right? So poly means that they're attracted to many, but that their attractions are not, it's not all. Right? Asexual is people who don't have sexual attractions or may not have romantic attractions. Demisexual is people who mostly only have romantic or erotic, who only have erotic attractions when they have a deep emotional connection to someone. And so there's lots of differences around, demisexuals. There's aromantic, gray romantic, hetero romantic. Those are people who don't necessarily have sexual attractions, but they have romantic attractions, and they're attracted romantically to other people once there's an emotional connection. Biromantic, homoromantic, panromantic, that those are the concept that I can be attracted romantically without being attracted sexually. And again, there's also pansexual, and demisexual. So there's ways that there could be an erotic component. And again, just ask. I know I'm going a little bit fast through these, but I'm trying to get through them so that we have time to do the next thing that we're going to talk about, which is about safer sex and Sex Ed 201, which is going to be exciting. So there's also lots of other flags. So those flags that we talked about are just some of the flags that exist. There's the bear flag, which is mostly men, but not all, but people who are attracted to same gender people, generally speaking, who are large or, and so I don't want to speak for bears, but it's a sub community. It's a subset of the LGBTQ plus community. There's the lesbian flag. Over a period of time, you know, lesbians were starting to feel like they, you know, got subsumed under some of the other identities. And so that there's a stand now that there's a lesbian flag, and there's lots of variations on the lesbian flag as it turns out. There's an intersex flag, which I wasn't sure whether the intersex flag should go in sexuality or if it should really go in gender, because intersex folks are folks who are born with chromosomal, reproductive, or genital differences, and it's also an identity. And some people experience that as a gender identity. Some people experience that as a sexual identity. So I just sort of put it in here for people to fit where it feels the best fit for them. There's a leather flag. There's a straight ally flag. And that for those of you who are listening who are straight allies, that's a great pin or a great flag to put on your, you know, your lanyard at work, or, you know, on your desk, or, you know, on the sticker on your car, places that let people know you're sort of a walking safe zone with the ally flag. And then heterosexual, which suddenly I forgot what heterosexual means. Oh, never mind. Heterosexual are people who are attracted only to folks who are trans and non-binary. And so again, there's like, when you go out onto the internet, there's millions of different flags. And that I also found these other identities like romantic. It's a romantic orientation on the aromantic spectrum. It's when you are in love with someone but don't desire reciprocation. Aeroflux, romantic orientation, whose orientation fluctuates but always stays on the asexual spectrum. Abrosexual, people whose sexual identity is fluid. Their identity changes over time, and that they can be, I don't know why I spelled this wrong over here. Anyway, so abrosexual is people whose sexual identity is fluid. And not everybody would agree with all of these identities. So, you know, ask. And then the last slide, although we talked about gender last week, I did just want to identify that there's as much diversity around gender as there is around sexual orientation. You know, there's cisgender, someone who identifies with the gender that they were assigned at birth. There's transgender, someone who's the sex they assigned at birth, it doesn't match who they are. There's non-binary, people who are not exclusively male or female, gender fluid, gender queer, and that's just a few of the gender identities. I took these definitions, by the way, were created by the folks at Non-Binary Era. So you can also check out more of their stuff, especially around non-binary things. So my last piece here is just the two things to remember. And then I'm going to slow down, and that we've got a few minutes before Kim comes on board. So I'm going to see if there's any questions or comments or challenges to the definitions. Here's just a reminder. You don't have to keep up. You just have to keep open. You don't have to understand, agree, or approve. You just have to accept and respect. And it's interesting. I think, you know, one of the things that I often do with young people is, and I don't ask grownups because y'all get cranky, but I often ask young people, how do you identify? And then often, no matter what they say, I will say something like, well, that's interesting. Tell me more about what that means for you. Or here's the definition that I've heard for pansexual. What does pansexual mean for you? Because again, we can't assume that we have the same identities as they have. And you know, the last thing I'll say here is that you know, when you think about youth culture, one of the things that's really true about youth culture is that they have their own language, and that as soon as grownups figure out the language or the slang, people change it anyway. So, so I'll tell you a quick story while waiting for it. Oh, I bet I got a question. I won't tell you a story. Are there any labels for, are these just labels for society? Are these just labels? Are these just labels for society? What an interesting question. I'm not 100% sure that I know exactly what you mean by that, but I would say that, here's one thing I would say about that. Young people and all people like to know where they fit and where they belong. And for young people in particular, developing their sense of identity, who am I in relation to myself and other people, is a core developmental task of adolescence. So some of the nuances that people are doing here are part of, the desire, the need to figure out who exactly I am, and to myself and in relationship to other people. So I think they're not just labels, they're really identities, and that identities matter, and how it's important to respect the way that young people see themselves and each other. If we're going to have a relationship, if you're going to have a working relationship with them, you have to start with the basic level of respect. And the basic level of respect is respecting their identity, respecting the names that they'd like to be called, and respecting the pronouns that they'd like to be called. And that, and I guess I'll leave it at that. Are there any other questions that have come up, or is that? All right, now people are just saying thank you. Well, thank you for listening. So I noticed that Kim has come into the waiting room. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and bring Kim in so that we can start talking about start talking about Sex Ed 201 and the idea of inclusive sexual education. All right, so let me admit Kim. Here she comes. All right. So what's interesting? It may be that because I'm inviting Kim in a little bit early, she's not in front of her computer right at the moment. And they're connecting to the audio. So, here she comes. She doesn't realize that we're on yet. Hi, Kim. Just wanted to let you know that we're live.
Hello.
Hi. So we just brought you in live.
Here I
am. So Kim, before you start sharing your screen and doing the Sex Ed 201, do you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do, talk a little bit about that Hartford Gay and Lesbian Health Collective and also what you do there?
I sure would. So I'm Kim Adamski. I'm an HIV prevention specialist. Hold on, let me shut the door so I don't disturb my roommates while they're working. Everyone's working from home. So yeah, I'm Kim Adamski, HIV prevention specialist. Hartford Gay and Lesbian Health Collective is located in Hartford on Broad Street. That's in the South End. It's number 1841. We're kind of limited on services right now because of coronavirus, but normally we provide STD testing, HIV testing, certain sexual health services. We have a dental clinic, which I actually have used. Our dentist is great. We have a bunch of different social groups and support groups. One of them is empowerment. That one is for gay and bisexual men ages 18 to 35. And we've actually been meeting via Zoom lately. So we've got some of that going on. We also have a queer prom coming up, which True Colors is co-hosting with us, which I think will be really fun. It's going to be virtual this year. And so if you follow Rainbow Room and our page, Hartford Gay and Lesbian Health Collective, you can find out more about that. So
it's on the True Colors page too, and
yes.
Other places. Yep, cool.
Of course, yeah. So we're trying to keep stuff going despite everybody being home. Yeah. So we also provide sex education and health education. We've been posting a lot online. So yeah, that's pretty much what we do. We've got some other services, but yeah. So I have been working in sexual health in various capacities since I was 18. at UConn, and I worked in actually New York State prisons doing sex education. I've worked with HIV positive folks, and I volunteered at the Health Collective before I worked there. So it's kind of my background. I like to think that makes me qualified to talk about sex ed.
Sounds like it is. So would you, whenever you're ready, you can start to share your screen. And when you share your screen, I'm gonna go into mute and close my video off. So the only people will be off to the side, but people will be looking mostly at you and your screen.
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right, here we go. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right, let me just open the presentation so it's nice and big for everyone. All right, so Sexual Health 201. I'm calling it 201 because I'm assuming that some of you at least have had some kind of sex ed, although not everyone does, and we will get into that a little bit. I already told you about myself, so we're going to skip over that. And towards the end of the presentation, I'm also going to be talking about sexual health recommendations during coronavirus, because that's a little different than what we usually talk about. So, how many people had sex ed that was like this?
I guess I'll never know what I missed on that first day of health class.
Don't have sex, because you will get pregnant and die. Don't have sex in the missionary position. Don't have sex standing up. Just don't do it, promise? Okay, everybody take some rubbers.
So, I mean, that's kind of what a lot of people got, especially depending on what state you're from. I think you probably all know that's from Mean Girls, although I know that's kind of been out for a while. Maybe maybe you all think I'm old, I don't know. I don't think I'm that old. But my main thing is, did your school do sex ed? Not all schools do. My school actually did not. They eventually did a sex ed curriculum, but not while I was there. So let's see some statistics. Less than half of US high schools teach sex ed, or comprehensive sex ed. So, I mean, abstinence only, like we just saw from that scene from Mean Girls, is more common than you would think. Less than 1/5 of US middle schools teach it. And actually, students are receiving less sex ed than they did in the past, which is kind of alarming. You'd think that we would be getting better, but apparently not. So some students receive no sex ed or abstinence only, and that's because there's no state mandates in any state about receiving sex education. So basically, if your school provided sex ed, they were going above and beyond what the rules were. Less than 5% of students received positive LGBTQ messages. So that's really low. Chances are almost none of you got it. I like to think that Connecticut might have had higher rates of that, but who knows? I didn't receive sex ed, so how would I know? 8 states actually prohibit LGBTQ sex ed, so that's pretty rough. I don't like that. So, I mean, you shouldn't have to figure it out on your own. A lot of people do, and unfortunately they find out from friends who might not have accurate information, the internet, which is kind of hit or miss, or I mean porn, which is not super helpful in like describing what sex ed should be. It's kind of you know, acting. So let's continue. Let's go over the basics of protecting yourself. This is stuff that you're more likely to be familiar with, but if you don't know, no shame in that. That's what I'm here for. So let's talk about what types of protection offer HIV and STD protection. Condoms and internal condoms, those are also known as female condoms. Those protect against STDs. Dental dams, which are a thin sheet of latex that is put over the vulva or anus for oral sex to make a barrier from each other's fluids that protects against STDs, excuse me. PrEP is a medication that people take every day to protect against HIV. It doesn't protect against other STDs though. So that's important to note. Mutual masturbation, that doesn't involve exchanging fluids at all. So that's pretty safe. Fantasizing, no touching, that's very safe. And abstinence, of course, is the only way that's 100%, effective against preventing STDs. All right, so let's talk about some that only offer pregnancy protection, which isn't a concern for everybody in the LGBTQ community, but it is still a concern for some people, and it's important to know about. So birth control pills protect against STDs. The implant, which goes in the arm and releases hormones. I misspoke. I meant birth control pills protect against pregnancy. Please, just implants also protect against pregnancy, goes in the arm, and it releases hormones gradually. The IUD is similar to the implant, but it goes in the uterus. There is also a non-hormonal copper one that is effective in preventing pregnancy. The patch goes on the skin, the NuvaRing, and the Depo-Provera shot are all hormonal pregnancy prevention. Now, these do not protect against STDs. So if you're using them and you're trying to prevent STDs, you should also use a backup method like condoms, internal condoms, stuff like I listed on the previous list. All right, so lube. I feel like a lot of people are kind of iffy about lube. Lube is a very common thing to need. It's not like bad or like shameful or anything if you have trouble producing the amount of lubrication that makes sex comfortable. Not everybody is able to produce a comfortable amount of natural lubrication. So that's where lube comes in. So there's a couple benefits of using lube. First of all, it makes sex feel better. If you have enough lubrication, sex is going to feel a lot better. If you don't have enough, it's going to feel a little frictiony in a bad way. It's also very important for anal sex because the anus does not produce natural lubrication. And in order to keep yourself from getting hurt and keep it comfortable, feeling good, you've got to have lube. Reducing the friction reduces the risk of STD transmission. If there's too much friction, it can cause more micro tears, which is like little teeny weeny tears in the anus or vagina. Now that means that there's like tiny open wounds, and it makes it easier for STDs to get into the body. Also, reducing friction feels better, so that's an added benefit right there. And there's lots of different types of lube. Does anybody know a type of lube that they've heard of? I don't know if you all can unmute yourself, so I might just have to monologue here. So we've got water-based lube and silicone-based lube. Those can both be used with condoms. Some people do use oil-based lubes, but you cannot use that with condoms. That will break down the condom and cause it to break. So, making the condom ineffective. And then there's also flavored lube, which is usually water-based. If you're using it for oral sex, it's important to make sure that it's sugar-free. If you have one with sugar, it is possible that it could change the pH balance of the vagina, and that could cause issues for some people. All right, so let's talk a little bit about coronavirus and what that has to do with safer sex. So why are we talking about coronavirus? That's not an STD. Well, because it's transmitted by proximity, breathing, closeness. And in order to have sex, you have to be in pretty close proximity, right? So hooking up right now is not recommended. And that's just because it's really hard to protect yourself against coronavirus compared to STDs. We have pretty good prevention methods for STDs compared to coronavirus. Wearing a mask is not 100% effective, especially if it's a cloth mask. It's better than nothing, but it's not going to protect you in really close quarters for an extended period of time. COVID-19 just has a lot of unknowns, and we don't know that much about how contagious it is. It seems like it is really contagious, whether or not people have lasting antibodies, which means whether or not they can get COVID-19 again after they've already had it. We don't know a ton about transmission. So since we don't know very much about it, it's really hard to make good recommendations. And so the safest thing to do is to avoid having sex with people that you're not quarantining with. Because, you know, it makes physical distancing impossible. You cannot have sex from a distance unless somehow you are able to reach each other from at least 6 feet away. And I don't think most of you have that kind of dexterity, sorry. Okay, so some ways that we can engage in sexual behaviors during coronavirus is masturbation, no risk. Fantasizing, also no risk. Dirty talk, a lot of people like that, right? One thing I want to warn you about is sexting. There are laws about sexting for minors that it's sending like nude pictures as a minor counts as child porn, so it's illegal. You have to be really careful with what you're doing. There's some boundaries. So make sure that you are both aware of the rules and that you are very careful. Because I mean, you don't want to get in legal trouble just for trying to have some sexy time, right? Not worth it. All right. So now that we've gone over some coronavirus stuff, and I really hope that that was helpful because I feel like there's a lot of mixed messaging going on. Consent. Consent is super, super important. In fact, don't get in bed without it. So, what are some ways to ask for consent? I was going to have you all shout it out at me, but I don't think that that is going to work. So I'm just going to have to tell you. Let's see what we got. Want to have sex? That's a great way to ask for consent. How far do you want to go? Got time for a quickie? Are you sure you're ready? That's a really good one to ask. Because it not only is asking for consent, but asking the person to evaluate whether they're ready to do it. Can I go down on you? There's one. You're not necessarily only asking for sex for penetrative sex. Any kind of sexual contact, you should ask for permission or consent. Is this okay? Can I be your first? These are all pretty clear ways to ask for consent. I'm sure you can all think of a lot of others. So, you know, just think about what you can ask. It doesn't have to be like a weird, like, sign this contract here or anything like that. Also, don't do that. That's a terrible idea. It can be sexy. These can be sexy. Okay, so when we get an answer from the person we're asking for consent, we need to make sure it's enthusiastic. They're like, yes, not like, I guess. Affirmative, so you get an actual yes. And clear. They're not just like, I don't know, mumbling or like, we don't want that. What is not consent? Not saying no is not consent. They have to say yes. A maybe is not consent, or an I'm not sure. Just being silent, nope, not consent. Having consented in the past, just because somebody has had sex with another person in the past doesn't automatically mean that they have to do it again in the future. Having said yes to a different sex act. So say I said yes to oral sex, but then I say no to penetrative sex. That's a no, and we cannot have penetrative sex then. Wearing certain clothes or acting a certain way, I think this is talked about quite a bit, but it is really important. Just because somebody is wearing something really sexy or acting flirtatious, that doesn't mean they want to have sex. Maybe they just like the way they look or love flirting. Being drunk or high. Somebody who's drunk or high cannot consent. If you're incapacitated, your consent, if you say yes, doesn't count because you don't have good enough judgment. Saying yes after being pressured. If I ask somebody over and over, come on, let's do it. Come on, can't we do it? Please, if you really loved me. And then they say yes, that is not consent. That's getting me to stop bothering you. And that does not count. Okay, so I think one thing that is really not talked about at all in sex ed, I don't think I've ever heard of this being talked about, is sex when you're trans or non-binary. So the thing about sex is it involves your sex organs. And folks who are trans or non-binary often feel gender dysphoria, which is they are uncomfortable with the sex organs that they currently have. So having to, you know, perform or like acknowledge, use those sex organs can trigger dysphoria. And not always. Some people are totally fine with it, but it is important to be careful, to be sensitive. Ask your partner what's okay, what they like, what they want to call their parts, stuff like that. If they're taking hormones, that can also have an effect on sex. A lot of times, testosterone can increase the sex drive while estrogen can reduce it. It can cause changes in sexual interests of any kind, really. I mean, it can have a lot of effects on what you're interested in sexually. And it can change the sensations of orgasm. So that's just something to be aware of. I mean, orgasm feels good regardless, but don't be caught off guard about that. Surgery, of course, is a big deal, and not everyone chooses to get it. But if you do, just be aware that surgically created sex organs do not work exactly the same way as ones that someone's born with. So you may have to get creative. Experiment. Masturbating, that can you can kind of learn what you like, and masturbating throughout whatever transition you're doing with hormones or surgery can help you figure out your changing preferences. Exploring with your partner can help you, although we want to be careful with that during COVID. And then sex toys. I mean, sex toys are, people can use sex toys with any gender orientation, whatever, but sex toys are also a really good way to get creative when you function differently sexually than most people. Okay, so I'd like to take questions. I'm not 100% sure how I can take those. Like, can people comment on Facebook or help me out? Let's see.
Okay, so can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So I'm asking the folks that are on watching all of the different streaming sources. Apparently it's not streaming on YouTube right at the moment, so we're going to upload it after it's over. And we'll see if there's any questions. Now, since there's a little bit of a delay, I want to answer, if you wouldn't mind, a question that came up at the end of the section that I did on the different sexualities. So if I could take a minute to do that, that someone wrote that the statement about heterosexual, which I can't even really say, seemed transphobic to them, that a trans man is a man, that we are not our differences. And so I want to just talk about that for a second. So that is absolutely true, that trans men are men, trans women are women, no question. And I went back and forth about whether or not I wanted to include that on the list. The reason I ended up including it on the list is that the folks that it seemed to be most talking about were people who themselves are non-binary, who are only attracted to other non-binary people. And so I think, number one, I misspoke when I said, transgender, because I think if you're talking about a trans man or a trans woman and people are only interested, if cisgender people are only interested in trans people sexually, that has kind of a weird fetishy kind of non-human, dehumanizing component, and I didn't mean that at all. So I apologize if that's the way that sort of came across. I think it reflects that people who are themselves non-binary, who are attracted to other people who are non-binary, and that I think that's the growing definition of that. There was a word that was used prior to heterosexual, which was scoliosexual, that very quickly went into disfavor because of that concept of scolio means crooked. And so I think this is sort of emerging out of that. And then someone wrote on the thing, and I think this might be for you, Kim, they wrote, "Don't yuck my yum," which is, I think, that's one of the ground rules that I do when I teach human sexuality, and
yeah.
that's a a great piece.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't mean that you have to do anything that your partner wants, but it does mean that you should be open to a reasonable amount of things. Doesn't mean violate your boundaries, but consider trying stuff. And it means that if your partner suggests something you don't want to do, don't be like, ugh, that's gross. You can say that in a respectful way, like, I see where you're coming from, or that's interesting that that's a fetish of yours, but that's not something I'm comfortable trying.
Right, exactly. That's great.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, thank you. All right, any other questions?
Effectiveness, differences in effectiveness for different STIs and pregnancy prevention methods, including pull-out.
Okay, so someone asked about the differences in effectiveness of first of all, different pregnancy options, including pulling out. How effective are those pregnancy prevention? So how effectively do they prevent pregnancy? And then secondly, how effective are they at STI or STI prevention?
Yeah, sure. So obviously the only 100% effective one is abstinence. But obviously that's not comfortable for everyone. And the most effective hormonal method for preventing pregnancy is the IUD and the implant. Those are super effective. I think they're above 99%, like very close to 100. Birth control pills, the patch, NuvaRing, quite effective, around 98%. The only thing with that is there's room for user error. So if you have an implant, it's not like you're going to forget to put the implant in. You could forget your pill though. You could take it really late and that will affect its efficacy. Condoms, pretty effective, somewhere around 90-95%. Female condoms a little bit lower, but still good. Pulling out, which you specifically mentioned, if you do it perfectly, it's reasonably effective, but almost nobody does it perfectly. The rate for doing it with average use is in the 70s. So not a great method. I mean, from a harm reduction perspective, it's certainly better than nothing, but it's certainly not my top recommended pregnancy prevention. Now, sorry.
Go ahead. In terms of STIs?
Yes. So for STIs, obviously again, abstinence, but using condoms and female condoms, those are a barrier. So the bodily fluids do not touch. And as long as they don't break, they're used correctly, used with lube preferably, they are quite effective. The only thing that they don't work well against is STDs that can be transmitted by skin to skin contact. And herpes is one of them if you have an outbreak, so like a sore. Syphilis, you can get a chancre sore, which is the little sore that is the first symptom and is very, very infectious. You can transmit that way if it's on a part that isn't covered directly by the condom. So that sort of thing can still be transmitted, although the likelihood is reduced by condoms. After that, I mean, PrEP is very, very effective in preventing HIV, but it doesn't prevent any other STDs. So it does depend on what you're talking about. So those are kind of the main methods I've got for preventing STDs. And of course, using a dental dam, as long as it's used and covers the entire, area that is being eaten out or whatever. I wasn't trying to phrase that, but yes. So the entire area, then it is a very effective barrier. And fun fact, if you don't have a dental dam, plastic wrap is pretty effective, as long as you haven't used it with food or something. That's gross.
That's funny. Somebody asked, how do you keep sex and relationships spontaneous with all these rules?
I mean, so the rules with consent and stuff, I mean, if you're about to have sex with somebody, it's not that hard to ask hey, you want to do it? That's not good. I don't personally think that's going to break it up too much. Sometimes with condoms, it can kind of break the moment a little, and it's not unusual for somebody to lose their erection while putting on a condom. So that's kind of a bummer, but I mean, after you put it on, you just, do a little more foreplay. You could do some touching, kissing, whatever, and that will, restore the boner, so to speak. So, I mean, it can interrupt sex a little bit, but it's really important to protect yourself. So I think the value of protecting yourself is more beneficial than the slight drawbacks there. Also, I mean, putting on a condom for your partner can help a lot. That can be kind of sexy. So, I mean, there's ways to creatively work it in. I hope that helps.
That helps. That helps. Any other questions? There's a bunch of people monitoring, so we're just waiting to see if there's any. We probably have time for maybe one or two more.
While we're waiting, I do want to mention you all can email me at any time at kim.a@hglhc.org. That's on the bottom corner of the screen right now with any questions you've got anytime.
That's great. And let's just say that the queer prom is going to be June 25th.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
it will be from 7 to 9:30, right?
I think it's 7 to 10.
Oh, 7 to 10, right? Okay, 7 to 10. There's going to be lots of different things happening during that time. There's going to be performances. There's going to be an opportunity. I think people are working on, an opportunity for people to share their pictures. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening. It's going to live stream on, the Rainbow Room Facebook. It's going to go on the True Colors Facebook. I think it's on the New Haven Pride Center Facebook page. It's going to be on the Triangle Community Center Facebook page, and it's going to be on OutCT page as well. So it really is, it's the Hartford Gay and Lesbians Health Collective's 29th annual, I think.
26th, I think.
26th annual queer prom. And all of these other organizations are co-sponsoring so that we can have as many young people as possible coming. Those who've come to the conference before and have gone to the dance, the DJ is DJ Ron, who'll be video DJing live from Chicago for the whole Pride thing too. So that's kind of cool. Any other?
Oh, sorry.
Nope, that looks like that's it on the questions. I just want to remind folks that if you have additional questions and you didn't want to ask them in public on the Facebook pages, you can always email Kim at kim.a@hglhc, which is the Hartford Gay and Lesbian Health Collective.org. And Kim, thank you so much for your time and your presentation. It was great. I learned a lot, and I really just appreciate it.
One more quick interjection about prom. Make sure you follow the hashtag BUQueerProm2020 because we've got a lot of pre-prom stuff going on.
Oh yeah. So what is that again? Say that again.
We've BUQueerProm2020. That's the hashtag, and we've got like giveaways. We're hoping people will submit their Pride-related artwork, stuff like that. So check it out. Or even on TikTok.
All right, Kim. Thank you so much. If you could stop sharing your screen, that would be.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
And thanks so much for coming on.
Of course, happy to. Let me figure out how to stop sharing my screen now. Oh boy.
There should be a something on.
Oh, got it.
You got it? Great. And lots of people. Oh, she's gone. Okay. All right. That was really great. Obviously, Kim knows a lot about safer sex and how to be sexy in a safe way. So that was really great. And the person sitting in the waiting room right now that I'm going to introduce and bring in is really the queen of bisexuality. So let me admit her, and I will, while she's joining us, I will do sort of a quick bio on her. And let me get out of that view. There she is. So this, you might be able to see now, this is Robyn Ochs. She is the queen of bisexuality. She has been working on these issues for a number of years. She's the editor of a number of and actually, you know what, I'm gonna let you talk more about the work that you do so you get the stuff all right. But I have known, I think she's presented at every conference except the very first one. So 25 years in a row. And for those of you who have been going on our YouTube channel and checking that out. She's got 2 presentations that are on the YouTube channel. I've noticed some people have already watched them. One is Bi Fabulous, which is really sort of an intro 101. That's great. I love that. An intro 101 about bisexuality, and it's great for young people and adults. And then her other presentation is really geared more towards adult providers, about really recognizing and supporting the unique needs of bi and pansexual youth, because often those needs get superseded. That's the wrong word, but get subsumed, thank you, under the umbrella LGBTQ plus, and the needs are really different. There are some ways in which the needs are unique. So let me ask Robyn to do an introduction and tell you how to get in touch with her. And then we're going to talk about Bi Shields.
So my name is Robyn Ochs, and I go by she and they pronouns. And I have identified as bi now for 43 years. And much of my work started from a place of self-defense, of finding that there were very few resources, that there was very little understanding of bisexual and other non-binary sexualities. And because the resources didn't exist, trying to do the work of generating some tools and programs and written materials that people could use so that they wouldn't have to deal with biphobia and bi-erasure in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And what are the, and on both of the YouTube videos, all of Robyn's contact information is there so that you can get the bisexuality newsletter and all the different things you want. Some of them are.
So you asked me that question, didn't you? So I'm the editor of 2 anthologies. One of them is called Getting Bi, Voices of Bisexuals Around the World, which is a 42 country anthology. It's a little grassroots project. The other book is called Recognize the Voices of Bisexual Men. And that book happened because I believe, and from my experience, bisexual men face a very specific type of erasure and having their identities disbelieved. And I wanted to do something as an ally to my bisexual male friends. And so I just decided I know how to do anthologies. So I made an anthology, and I did this in company of a bisexual man. So there were 2 of us who edited that book. And I'm very proud of that project. And then I also am the editor of an ongoing an ongoing publication, which is called Bi Women Quarterly. And that's another little grassroots project. And it's a publication that I believe is in its 38th year of production.
Wow, 38 years, my goodness.
Oh,
It's amazing how time flies when you're having fun.
and I am having fun with that one. I love editing it, and I love the people who submit their writing and their artwork, and they're just people from all over, and it really is a beautiful and affirming experience.
Yeah, that's so great. When you and I were talking about this presentation and coming on live, we went into this sort of whole discussion about Bi Shields, and it started with I was thinking out loud about how that we live in a world which is not LGBTQ plus friendly all the time, right? And that no matter where we go, we're going to run into people who have opinions that are not affirming, right? And so how do we give our young people the tools to not take it so personally right? And so you have a system that you use, right, to help that I think you sort of developed it, and I don't want to speak for you, but developed it as a way to protect yourself in this process, in this work, but it works with young people. And I think that for the folks who are listening, whether you're a young person yourself or whether you're somebody who works with young people, these are tools which I think are really effective. So now I'm just going to shut up. And I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about your, I think I have it listed as a 5-point plan.
I would say that it's not just young people too. I believe I come across people of all ages who, when they decide that, you know, their experience is such that the word bisexual applies to them, or some other non-binary sexuality identity like pansexual or fluid. But when people, let's imagine like someone decides that the word bisexual describes them, what often comes next is that feeling of being bewildered. Like, why do people think all these weird things about this identity? Like, what is going on? Like, you know, if you come out to someone as bisexual, oftentimes they say things that are sometimes pretty strange. And one of the ways that oppression works is that we internalize that stuff. Like, we hear negative messages, we hear negative stuff said about people in our identity group, and we internalize it. We take it inside ourselves, and we sometimes doubt our own validity and our own sense of value. And this is, you know, this is true for all kinds of oppression, you know, for oppression based on any identity. But for bi plus folks, so many of the stereotypes are about hypersexualization, are about the idea that it's not a real thing. And when I ask people to generate a list of stereotypes, people have no trouble. It's usually, you know, very easy for a room full of people to come up with 40, 50 different things. And, you know, we usually run out of time before we run out of whiteboard space and out of things to write. And I think the thing that helped me personally is understanding that these stereotypes aren't actually caused by us, that bi plus people didn't cause these stereotypes. And so I came up with this tool, which has 5 different factors, which I think can explain away almost all of the stereotypes about bisexual and other people with non-binary sexualities. I use the term bi plus often when I'm talking about that. And so one of the things is the idea that bisexual people are really hard to see or to identify. Like, how would you recognize that you were talking to someone who identified as bisexual? We live in a culture that has like heteronormativity as the assumption. We assume that everyone's heterosexual unless we specifically know that they're not. So, you know, I get coded as heterosexual all the time by people meeting me for the first time. If people saw me in public with my wife, I would probably get coded in their minds as lesbian. 2 women, lesbian couple, and then people make that false leap of logic to think that that means 2 lesbians. And so the only time bisexual people actually get recognized is when we are in, they see us in 3-way relationships, or they see us, you know, having relationships with people of different genders, of more than one gender at the same time. And people come to think that bisexuality equals having multiple relationships. And, you know, that's one example. And I think that explains stereotypes such as promiscuous or threesomes or things like that. And then another one is just our tendency to think in binaries, that how binary we are in our thinking, and how we have the tendency to take all kinds of complicated things and reduce them to simple pretend binaries, like man and women, you know, where some of us have come to understand that gender is way more than just 2 things, or the political binary, Democrat, Republican, or the racial binary in the United States is often, you know, thought of as black and white. And all of those binaries are way, way oversimplistic, and they leave out entire, you know, groups of people. And they in reality, they don't make any sense, but yet they persist. So for me, understanding that we are binary thinkers, that we tend to be binary thinkers, just helped me understand why people erase bisexuality so much, because people, when they think about sexuality, they want to make a binary, so they make gay and straight. And so when people say that bisexuality doesn't exist, or that all people who call themselves bisexual are actually just in transition from one of these real things to the other real thing, that's binary thinking. and just understanding that that's not about me. Binary thinking is not about me. Like when someone says something that has a binary assumption, it's really on them, not on me. And then another one that I'm not going to do all of them, but the third one I'll just share is just when lesbian and gay people say hurtful things about bi people, I believe that there's an expression, hurt people. And I believe that when we're feeling our own oppression, it's all too easy to take out our oppression on other people within our own community who are slightly more marginalized than we are. And I really believe that when lesbian or gay men say things that are mean about bisexuals, I think that's what's going on. And again, this doesn't excuse it, but it can help me understand it. And again, not take it so personally. So I think what happened for me over time is just understanding that a lot of the things that people say, they're not really about me at all. They're about the person who's saying them. They're about limitations in the ways that we've been taught to think. And what that means is that when somebody says one of these things to me, it doesn't pierce my heart. It just, I'm able to say, oh, there's binary thinking. Mm-hmm. And this is a tool that I want to share with everybody, and especially with young people, because if we can understand that a lot of the stupid out there isn't about us, but it's about cultural, lack of understanding and lack of information, that it's actually not about us personally, I think then those kinds of microaggressions don't hurt us as much. And I think of that, I really do think of that as like a biphobia shield that protects me from, and can protect other people from these kinds of comments and statements. And I know it's helpful for people. I've had people write to me and tell me and come up to me and say, oh, you spoke 2 years ago and I came to your workshop at True Colors and oh, I use that all the time. And when people say this and that, and I just love it because I really do believe that it's something, we need protection. We need anything we can, all the tools that we can come up with to help protect us from the ignorance out there. And this is I feel good about this tool because I do believe that it does help people.
I agree. I absolutely agree. That, I think that just, even just having that ability to say, oh, that's non-binary thinking. That's not about me. Oh, that's a stereotype that exists because people don't see bi people because of bi erasure. That those are things that being able to label it, name it, and recognize that it's not about you is a tool for, keeping some of the stuff from landing home. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because we do take this stuff in and it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly, there's a concept in psychology called minority stress,
mm-hmm.
which is in its shortest version, the idea that being a member of a stigmatized minority group is stressful. And I like to tell young people about this concept too, because I think when I think about minority stress, first of all, it acknowledges that it is stressful to hold an identity that carries stigma. But secondly, inside the idea of minority stress is the idea that stress is actually not caused by you. It's not caused by who you are. It's caused by where you are. It's a stress that's actually caused by your external environment. Like being Black in America is not in and of itself stressful. It's not being Black that is stressful. It's being Black in the context of a racist culture. Being LGBTQ is not in and of itself stressful. It's stressful because you're inside the context of a culture. So you're not the problem. You're not causing the stress. You're not the problem. The problem is that our culture is toxic. Our culture is polluted and our culture needs to change. We don't need to change.
Right. That's great. There's a couple of questions that have come in. Can I ask you one of them?
Yes, please.
One of them is bi-curious an offensive term?
No. I'd say any of these terms, it's not offensive if somebody uses it. If the person who's using it chooses to use it, then it's not offensive. It's their term. It would be offensive if somebody said, if I said to you, I'm bisexual, and you said, no, you're just bi-curious, that would be offensive because you would not be hearing what I said. But I do know people who identify as bi-curious or as questioning or as uncertain. And one of the points that I try really hard to drive home is the idea that there is no shame in not having all the answers. There is no shame in questioning. There is no shame in being on your identity journey. Identity is a journey. As we move through our lives, we learn stuff about ourselves. That's called life. And as we travel through life, we get more information about ourselves, and that information may cause us to solidify our identities, to get more clear about how we actually do identify. It may cause us to change the word that we choose to use to identify ourselves, and that's fine. Like, I think that there's some people feel like, oh, I'm not allowed to change. Like, once I've said I'm this, then I'm not allowed to, I have to like marry this word forever. But I really believe that identities are adjectives. They're just tools that we use to communicate information about ourselves to other people. And they're tools that we use to help us understand ourselves. And they're just tools. What's real is you. What's real is you as an individual person. And if you get more information about yourself that causes you to want to use a different word, that's fine. Sometimes people change their word because they just learned a new word they hadn't heard before. It's like, oh, that's a great term. I like that. And that should be fine. And also, if you can think about identities as adjectives, there's no limit in how many you can have. You know, I already said I identify as bi, but I also identify as queer. And I also identify as pan. Like, those are all labels that work for me. I would say my primary identity is bi because that's the one I've had the longest, and that I'm pretty fond of it. But the other words, like, I love the word queer. It works for me just fine, and it describes me. So I think that if we would relax a little bit about identities and not feel like we have to figure it out and have all the answers and then like make that commitment, like they're just words. They're tools for communication, and I want to be helped by them, not trapped in them.
And that's I love that. They're tools for communication. You want to be helped by them, not trapped in them. Somebody wrote, is bi-curious a state of mind or a real identity? I think you sort of answered that, but do you want to dig it again?
It's a real identity. And I think for some people, it may be a real identity for a period of time. It's probably not a real identity for people for a long, I don't know, maybe some people, who knows? Yeah, it's a real identity for some people, I'd say. And many people probably travel through that identity on their way to a different one.
And I always say, when I do this, that you don't have to understand, you don't have to even necessarily accept or approve. You just have to accept and respect, right? So if someone says they're bi-curious, you say, oh, okay, tell me more about what that means for you, right? Or I'm pansexual, tell me what that means for you. That's great, right?
Yes, and that's really important. Two things. One is, there's this student that I met from West Virginia, this woman, Julia, who said, she gave me this expression, which I love. She said, it's identity, not you-dentity. And I just like, as soon as I heard that, my heart just sang and I got so happy. And I just thought, yes. And I wrote it down and I, of course, made a pin. One of the other things I do is I have an Etsy shop called Byproducts. And that's one of the pins that I have on my shop. And then the other thing is, you just said something. What was the second part of what you just said? Because that was equally brilliant. What did you say?
Right, that you don't have to accept, you don't have to understand or approve, you just have to accept and respect.
Yes, so I like to think of labels, like when someone tells you their label, you don't know that much about them yet. I like to think of labels just as like a little name tag or a little sign on the door, that if you want to understand someone who comes out to you as anything, I think it's important to know that you don't know exactly what they mean, because in order to know exactly what they mean, you need to knock on that door and ask them if they'd be willing to tell you more about what that particular identity word means to them. Because it's not like something you can look up in the dictionary and there's just one meaning, because identity is complicated. People are complicated. Different people use the same word, but don't mean exactly the same thing by it. Again, they're just adjectives, they're tools for communication. And so, but I believe that if somebody is in your life and they're important to you and you want to understand them, it would be great to very politely, first of all, if someone shares their identity with you, that is the biggest gift, because in a culture that is so heteronormative. For anybody to tell you that they have an identity that's different from that is an act of courage, and it's also an act of trust. They're telling you that they trust you, and that for me, when someone comes out to me, I feel honored. But what I need to do next is I try to remember first, thank them. Like, thank you for telling me how you identify. I really appreciate that you trusted me to tell me that. And then the second thing I try to remember to do is to say, would you be willing to tell me more about what identifying as, fill in the word, right, means to you? And then I try to be quiet and listen and hear what they're actually telling me. After we've had that conversation, then I think I might actually have a sense of what they mean, but not until then.
Yeah, that's great. Somebody asked two things. One is the name of your Etsy shop again, because they're going to put it in the comments. Oh, wait, she heard it. It's byproducts.
One
right?
word, byproducts, yes.
Byproducts, right?
And I know it's a great name, so you're welcome.
Yeah. And so they put it into the comments. And then they ask, how do you distinguish between bi and pan, or do you distinguish?
So I would say if you ask 100 people who identify as bi exactly what that term means, you will get more than one answer. If you ask 100 people who identify as pan exactly what that term means, you will also get multiple answers. When I think of the word bi, so for me, and actually if you Google definition of bisexuality, this will probably come up on the first screen, unless you're on a phone. But if you're on a computer screen, my definition of bisexuality is I call myself bisexual because I acknowledge in myself the potential to be attracted romantically and or sexually to people of more than one gender, not necessarily at the same time, not necessarily in the same way, and not necessarily to the same degree. So that's a broad definition.
Right, but every phrase in that is important.
Yes, I call myself, it's about self-naming, right? Bisexual because I acknowledge in myself the potential. I was bisexual for 5 years before I ever acted on it. I knew who I was. I knew what was inside of me. I knew what my potential was long before I ever got up the courage to date a woman like that. I was much better at labeling myself than I was at like moving beyond that, because I have the potential to be attracted romantically and or sexually, because those are not the same thing, as I've learned from younger people in my life, to people of more than one gender. And that is designed to understand that gender is not a binary, more than one, so it's expansive. And then they're not necessarily at the same time, in the same way, or the same degree. And yeah, you're right. Every single word of that is super important and essential. Now, so that's my definition of bisexuality. When I think of pansexual, the way I would define it is I think of the word, actually personally, I think of the word panorama, because pan means across a wide spectrum. I think of people who are attracted to people across a wide spectrum.
Pan means all.
Or
so, when that prefix means all.
Yeah. So
But
I think
not everybody identifies as being attracted to all genders or attracted to, so that's why the point that we're making, you have to ask, that the label is just the note on the door. Then the next thing is what happens after that.
Yeah. Yes, that's a good example. And I think that someone else, if you asked a different person exactly what those two words mean, you might get they'd probably be similar in a lot of ways, but you might get variations of definitions, and that's absolutely fine. And that's why I think of them as conversation starters, not as the whole conversation.
That's great. So we have time for maybe one or two more questions. God, this half hour went fast. One of the questions is that do many bi women feel like they're discriminated against by lesbians?
Historically, yes. And I think part of what's going on is that the power of the patriarchy, the heteropatriarchy is the cis heteropatriarchy, is that people in mixed gender relationships are given more goodies than people who are in similar or same gender relationships. And so I think for many lesbians, there's that fear that whatever you have to offer, it won't be enough to compete with all the power and privilege that comes with heterosexual relationships. But yeah, that's the fear. But I think sometimes people like eliminate people as potential partners, not knowing if in fact they could be great partners. I actually had a woman who left me once because she was afraid I would leave her. I wasn't going to leave her.
Right.
Luckily, I'm married to a woman now, and she luckily is secure enough in her own self that she doesn't feel at all threatened by my identity. And so far, we're now in season 24 of our rom-com. And
there you go. Hey, Robyn, hold on one second. Heather and Chris are in the waiting room, and they're on the phone. Okay, so we need to ask you another question so that I can talk to them very quickly. So why don't you just talk about some stuff, and I'll be right.
Why don't I just talk about some stuff? I guess a couple of resources that I would like to share with anyone watching this. One of them is the Bisexual Resource Center, which is biresource.org, biresource.org. And that's a national US-based nonprofit which creates resources and materials. They have brochures, they have pamphlets, and I think they're a wonderful organization. I'd also send people to my own website, which is robynochs.com. And I better spell it for you because neither of those is phonetic. ROBYNOCHS.com, robynochs.com. And on my website, I do have some other resources listed, and I've put up several of the articles and interviews that I've done over the years. So there's some good material there. There's some video material, some written interviews and transcripts and things like that. But there actually are some really good resources out there. There are a lot of people who have made wonderful YouTube videos explaining their identity and working to educate other people. And yeah, so I would definitely, there are resources out there. You just need to go out and find them, but they are there. And I also want to point out that of people of all ages, about half of people who identify as LGB identify as bi. Bi is actually a very large segment of the population. And again, because we think in binaries, we don't always realize how many people are bi, but we are everywhere and we are in large numbers. And we have some beautiful, beautiful communities out there in the United States.
Great. Robyn, thank you so very much. I so appreciate your time. I know you're like crazy busy doing stuff, and I just so appreciate you. So thank you. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Do you want to say one last thing before you go?
I do. I want to say that I appreciate you more than you appreciate me. From one Robyn to another.
One Robyn to another. All right, my friend. We will talk again soon. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you.
Bye.
That's right.
Mute. Hi. Hi. So thanks again to Robyn Ochs for participating with us. I am really so excited and so like fangirling about Heather, Mae, and Crys Matthews are going to be joining us now. So they're going to perform. They're doing a Pride tour and traveling remotely all over the country. That because Pride must go on, right? Because go on, and they also, I just want to say that just a couple of days ago they did a concert that raised $8,300 for Black Lives Matter. Yep. So like, yeah, what you're doing. They're also on June 10th doing a concert for us for True Colors to support queer youth. And so if you haven't bought your ticket yet, you best buy your ticket. And so I'm going to shut up. They're going to perform, and then we're going to have, a conversation. Do you want to say anything first before you perform, or you just want to jump into?
we just wanted to say a big thank you to True Colors and to you, Robyn, for having us. It's so, not just for Pride, but supporting LGBTQ artists year round. So we wanted to say that. And also we wanted to know, how many songs would you like to hear?
At least 2.
All right, let's do it.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Me
So
too.
what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the view so that
Yeah.
I'm on the screen and it's just all you.
Sounds good.
There you go.
Amazing. Let's do You Are My Favorite and maybe,
You want these?
yeah, let's see. You want to do, I'm wondering if we should do Prodigal Son and You Are My Favorite. What do you think? What you gonna do? You got one. Singing out.
No.
Are we doing that one?
It's
Which
gonna
one
do
are
Be
you
Not
gonna do?
Afraid.
Oh, look at it. You look at just this butch just sitting here telling femmes what to do. I cannot even believe that.
That's my
Goodness.
job. It's my only job.
I can feel you, but I can't stop you, and I don't want to, so I don't, and they can't see us, so they can't stop us. And even if they could, we'd keep on going, going, going. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of them. I'm not scared of what they'll say, 'cause holding you is worth the pain of what's coming. Ooh, so I whisper your name, and I look at your face. Never thought I'd get this close. Never let myself hold, and I turn on the lights, and I pull back the shades, let them find eyes, let them find eyes, 'cause I'm not ashamed, ashamed, ashamed. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of them. I'm not scared of what they'll say, 'cause holding you is worth the pain of what's coming. 'Cause it's not wrong. No, it's not wrong. No, it's not wrong. It's not wrong. No, it's not wrong. No, it's not wrong. Our love's 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 not wrong. I'm not afraid. I'm not scared of what they'll say, 'cause holding you is worth the pain of what's coming. Baby, baby, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid.
So lovely.
Yeah, that's
I love that
so
song
great.
much.
See?
You
Aren't
can't
you all
see.
glad I picked that?
She always does that. She does it all the time to me.
I love that song.
Thank
You can't see it, but the hearts that are flying by
Ah,
are just really great. people are saying like, wow, their voices. Hard. All right.
Thank
So I'm
you
gonna
so
shut up again.
much.
Your
Yes,
wife-
we'll do another one if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Cool. We love to.
perfect.
You can even do 2 more if you want.
What do we want to do now?
What we could do eventually, we could do Prodigal Son. We could also do Stand Up.
Oh, dang. Well, okay, so here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking because there's a lot of youth here, and there's a lot of parents that I think are watching with them. I feel like Prodigal Son would be a great one because it starts out where a lot of LGBTQ people start out. And I know that I started out there as well, with this place of fear. And I mean, all of us, because until we live in a society where our love and the people that we are, as I identify as queer,
Identify as lesbian.
and until it's boring to be who we are, it still is hard to come out of that box.
Definitely.
So this song starts off, which is the song is Chris's song called Prodigal Son. It starts off in that place of fear, but wait for the ending.
In a town way down in Tennessee lives a teenage boy who's got a secret buried deep. He loves his mama like a good son ought to do. Loves his sister, loves his daddy, Lord. He loves his Bible too. He's been tossing, turning, losing sleep, his bloodshot eyes red from worry, so afraid that they might see. Little angel with the worried eyes, you've got to realize only the truth will set you free. You are not broken, damaged, or confused, don't let that hypocrites make you feel wrong for being you. It's such a heavy cross to bear for love and peace, but you got all your life to live, so why not live it free? Years later and still he's losing sleep in a college town 300 miles from Tennessee. He did the only thing that he could think to do, leave tonight or live and die this way. What would most of us choose? He keeps his family arms length away, he keeps the phone calls and the letters short, so scared what they might say. Little angel with the frightened heart, you've got to finally start accepting all of who you are. You are not broken, damaged, or confused, don't let them hypocrites make you feel wrong for being you. It's such a heavy cross to bear for love and peace, but you got all your life to live, so why not live it free? In a town way down in Tennessee lives a mother sick with worry, wondering why her son can't sleep. He's been growing cold and distant by and by. Something about his voice and eyes tells her mind, don't dare ask why. But in her heart she knows what she should do. A mother always knows, especially when her kids don't want her to. And she says, little angel, don't you run from us, come on back home. Don't you know it doesn't matter who you love? You are not broken, damaged, or confused, don't let them hypocrites make you feel wrong for being you. It's such a heavy cross to bear for love and peace, but you got all your life to live. So why not live it free? So why not live it free? So why not live it free?
Yeah. Why not live it free? That is so great. That is so great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. I hope that we'll have time for you to do one more if
Totally.
but I would love for you to talk a little bit about your sort of your own journey
Yeah.
in this work that you've been performing for a while. Like, how did you come into deciding that this is who you wanted to be in the world?
Well, I'll go first.
Yeah,
if you
go
want.
for
Yeah,
it.
so I've been out since I was 18, which was many, many years ago. And I'm a preacher's kid. My mom is a preacher, so that's why sometimes I have songs with titles like Prodigal Son. And when I first came out, it was very, very tumultuous. I'm originally from southeastern North Carolina. It's very rural down there, incredibly conservative. And so coming out was kind of like those horror stories you hear about. But the thing that's been so beautiful about the relationship with my mom is that we have now this incredibly gorgeous relationship. She's so supportive, so amazing. She's like always about showing up at the shows and like supporting fans and being like, oh my gosh, the people are so lovely and beautiful and wonderful. And it's just like, she's just evolved, you know. It's kind of like at some point people stop letting their fear about what other people are going to think about them or their kid, which is so often what is at the root with parents. In a lot of ways, it has more to do with the shame that they are feeling from their peers than what it is they actually feel for their kids in a lot of ways. And so she finally, being the human that she is, got around to realizing that, which helped give me a nice full well and let me do this music that I do, this work that I do. You know, I was raised from a perspective of deep, deep love of people. And so even in the social justice work that I do, the social justice music that I do, I try to always write from a place of love because that's how I was raised. And that's the beautiful thing I've gotten to witness in my own life is my mom's love for me kind of superseding the things that were initially making her kind of pull away from me. And so it's like I'm constantly getting that reinforced in my daily life. And so in my music and in my work, I try to come at things from that perspective. And that's kind of how I am walking this path that I'm on musically and in life. So.
And for me, I grew up, you know, as a queer person. I grew up in this box. Well, okay, I like people of the opposite sex, so therefore I am straight. And being a femme-presenting person, it was so easy for me to put myself in that box, for others to put myself in that box. And I grew up in a church, and even though my parents have always been LGBTQ supportive and pretty much threw a pride parade just for me when I came out, I and society, I placed me up in this box because of being queer. And it wasn't until I actually met my partner that I realized, and it was actually in my early 20s that I realized, oh, no, she is not straight. She's definitely queer. And it was going to pride events and going to things like the Singing Out Tour, like True Colors, that I actually found me. Because I didn't realize that I just pushed myself so far down that there was this well of depth and voice that I had never let myself tap into. And when I realized that I was actually indeed hiding that I was queer, I was able to really be the artist that I am now, which is writing social justice music, LGBTQ positive music, mental health positive music today.
That's great. That's really wonderful. And it's funny, Crys, when you're talking about your experience with your mom, that a lot of the work that I do with social workers and training is to say, listen, the parents' initial response is rarely their final response, because at the end of the day, they love their children.
Exactly.
And that often they're going to find their way back to them.
Exactly.
For that love. And so that was just beautiful. And we also get lots of kids today that come out and and everybody goes like, cool. Right?
Yeah.
So both experiences.
Yeah, I love those viral videos of like the kids coming out and like they're so upset, they're so frantic, and they come out and the parents are like, well, yeah.
Yeah.
I told was it something else? Like, you're not pregnant, are you? Like we were pretty much sure that you were gay, but generally just we don't care. Like,
we don't care.
We're just
I
happy
told
that
my
you're
dad.
happy.
I told my dad when he was mowing the lawn. He was mowing the lawn, and I was like, Dad, and he was like, yeah, and I was like, I'm dating a woman, and he released the thing, and he went, okay, can you give me a glass of water? That's it.
That's so great.
Yeah.
And Heather, you do a lot in your music around mental health issues and body positivity.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, especially in the LGBTQ community, it's really important that we recognize that there's body stigma just in our own community. I know that my friends who are gay men, there's a lot of stigma about being I think there's like this whole like no fats, no femmes, and honestly, like we need to eradicate that, especially in the LGBTQ community. We have risen so far from oppression. Yeah. Pride began from a riot of people of color and drag queens and transgender humans gathering together and just saying enough is enough. And so coming now, here we are accepted in most places in society. We're working on it to make it everywhere, but we're accepted in society, and yet we are taking these little micro oppressions and pushing them on our own community. And so I really like to, I'm a proud fat woman, and for 25 years I thought I was like a skinny girl, just like stuck in this like fat girl body, and like one day I'd get out of this body and I'd be allowed to look at myself naked in the mirror and say, ooh girl, you look good today, but I realized like I love those beauty standards that I held myself to, and the beauty standards that we as LGBTQ people hold ourselves to, well, they're not of our own making. Do you hear me? They're not of our own making. Let me just have a quick little moment, just step up on my soapbox and just say that it is a cisgendered white straight male that usually most likely created these things so that we would buy them and just continue to help society grow economically, that the diet industry. They aren't things that we told ourselves. There's something that somebody else told us. You can't be fat. You can't be that thin. You can't have those curves. You got to have these curls. You got to have a thigh gap. And you got to have muscles and like a face like Ryan Gosling and like abs like Jesus, like it just is ever ending until finally one day you look in the mirror and you say, I make my own standards of what it means to be beautiful and good enough. So that's the body positivity. And in terms of the mental health positive, May was Mental Health Awareness Month. And for us as LGBTQ people, it is essential that we take care of our brains so that we can take care of our community. Because our community right now, especially those who are people of color, our transgender friends and family members, we need to be there for them. And so that means we have to take care of our minds. 1 in 5 Americans, 1 in 5 struggle with mental illness. If you look around your room right now, even if there's only like 5 people in it, that's a lot of crazy people. We need to be talking about it, right?
Yeah.
And so, especially as LGBTQ people, we need to take care of ourselves. So yeah, there's my little soapbox.
Now you know why I'm so fangirly. Not only do I love your music, but I love the vision that you have about who we need to be in the world. And so I'm just really grateful for the work that you're doing. I wonder if you want to sing one more song.
Yes.
And then but before listen, the singing out tour, right? Somebody wondered if y'all have like remote jet lag.
Remote.
I came close last night.
Last night we did a concert in Portland. So the concert was at 10 p.m. Yeah. Tonight we're doing a concert in Seattle, and the concert at 11:30 p.m.
Our time.
Oh my God. All right, because
naps. But again, we're mental health positive. We're body positive. We're taking care of our minds and bodies. We just need you to show up. So just go to the singingouttour.com and you can get your ticket for the True Colors event. And I will also say it is a Zoom event.
Yes.
So you will be able to see all of your pride people, all of your friends, all their expressions, identities, the various pride gear and protest gear. Feel free to show up however you express and see your community. And we're doing giveaways and games during the show. So it's more than just watching us sing songs.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so cool.
A lot of fun.
So singingout.com.
Yes.
Right?
Singingouttour.com.
Yep.
Singingouttour.com. It's also on all the True Colors pages with the link. It's on our website. So buy your tickets. Let's go.
That's right.
And I will say, just because I know you're not going to say it, part of the proceeds goes to True Colors.
Yeah.
So that's I feel like I need to say it because I'm a big supporter of y'all and Robyn and everything that you do.
Thank you for the work that you're doing, Robyn.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right, let's have another song and then we'll.
Hey.
Okay. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for having us.
We do I'm Still Here?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. We're gonna make y'all sing. But don't worry, we can't see you or hear you. So even if your voice isn't like Aretha Franklin, that's alright, that's okay. We want you to sing anyway. Because when we sing, we release chemicals in our mind, dopamine and serotonin that make us feel better. Especially when we sing words like, I'm still here. Alright, here we go. I've been so busy just asking and begging. When does the good start? Oh, I think I started on the second verse.
You sure did.
Give me the first verse.
All
All of this running and racing, I forgot that I've got 2 feet and I'm proud of where they've been. Bruised and I'm tired and burned by the fire, but I've kept moving. And in all of this running and racing, I forgot that I'm still here. Yes, I am. Yes, we are. And I've been so busy just asking and begging, begging, begging. Oh, when does the good start? When will I arrive? Oh, wasting my time rushing through life, too blind to see that I'm still alive. And in all of this running and racing, I forgot, oh, that I'm still here. Oh, sometimes the best I can do is just wake up, open my eyes, put a brave face on, ignore the lies in my mind that say I'm better off dead than alive. And in this war against the living, I'm proud of myself for not giving in, 'cause I'm still here. Alright, sing that. I'm still here. Keep going. I'm still waking, I'm still crying, I'm still laughing, I'm still trying, I'm still holding, I'm still breathing, I'm still talking and I'm still screaming, I'm still giving and I'm still taking, I'm still sending and I'm not breaking, as I'm still here. Sing it. I'm still here. At the top of your lungs, I'm still here. Yes, I'm still here. Oh, I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still. Now let's sing. We're still here. We're still here. Yes, we are. Think of all that you have been through, and yet you're here. Yet you're here. That is amazing, amazing, amazing humans. Now I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still
I'm still here
Thank
too.
you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you so much. We will see you on the 10th. I'm really looking forward to it. I can't wait. I can't wait to be there. And thank you for coming on today,
Absolutely.
sharing your music and some of your story with us. I look forward to seeing you on the 10th, and thanks a lot.
Thank
Pleasure.
you.
Thanks so much.
I'm going to tell people before we go that we have my sister-in-law wanted to do something for True Colors, so she made all of these.
Oh, I lost you.
There she is.
There you are.
All right, I turned the video off, so now
There
I'm
you
turning the video back on. No, the video's off again.
There you are.
You have to just click it once, and then
Just once.
so my sister-in-law made all of these
Oh, so
in all
awesome.
the different, right?
Oh
That's
my
so
gosh.
great.
And so there's just a, and these are
Yes,
available.
she
They're
wants that.
for sliding scale from $10 to $15. There's going to be a link in the comments for people to get those. She also made us shoelaces.
Cool.
Right? In all the different colors, and because we have to mail them, these are running from like $6 to $8, but it's just
So cool.
you can. And one of the reasons they did this is that we normally do a fundraiser at our annual conference, and so we bought everything, but then the conference didn't happen, so we've $10,000 worth of stuff, sort of hanging around that we're trying to help. Anyway, so I wanted to put that out there. I also wanted to let folks know that next week the focus is going to be on school systems and family stuff. And Crys, the stuff that we were talking about before, the person who's going to be on Friday, next Friday, is Caitlin Ryan. She did all of the seminal research around the things that families do that increase the likelihood that their kids will hurt themselves, and the things that families do that decrease the likelihood that their kids will hurt themselves. And she starts from the perspective that families love their children. And so she starts, really working with the families to help them move forward. So she's going to be on. We have young people that are going to be on talking about their experiences in school. So it's going to be a really good event. And as always, all of these events will be uploaded to YouTube, so you can watch them at your leisure. If you want to hear their music again before June 10th to get yourself all psyched for that, just go to the YouTube or the Facebook channel, and there you go. All right. Well, thank you again both very much. Thanks.
So grateful. Thank you
for participating. And we'll be back again soon. Bye.